After Julius Caesar died, his nephew Octavian became the next in line to be emperor. And wanting to be impressive and to capitalize on the fame and the nobility and the honor and power and glory associated with Rome and with Julius Caesar, Octavian not only continued being an emperor, but also took the name for himself Augustus, from the same word we get our English word august, meaning impressive, important, great, awesome. So you have this guy taking the nickname for himself, Mr. Impressive, Octavian, Mr. Impressive, who then also started telling people that he was a god and that his birth in the world was good news for all people. To make people even more impressed by him wherever he went, the Roman emperor would have trumpets blaring and banners flapping in the breeze, military armies just to intimidate people. In other words, Octavian, you get the sense, was trying too hard to impress people and was so committed to the idea he needed to get people to think he was a god. He would go to any length to make people in awe and intimidated by his mere presence. When you've got a fragile ego, when you are insecure, you need to wow and dazzle people that way and make yourself look like you're something awesome. The living God does things differently, you might say. We're going to hear this coming Sunday from Matthew's gospel as Jesus is talking to his disciples, right? These ordinary people, they're fishermen and tax collectors, right? They're just ordinary, barely educated, speaking the common language, not terribly refined, some of them outcasts because of their former lives and backgrounds. He sends them and says to them, whoever welcomes you welcomes me. And whoever welcomes me welcomes not just me, but the one who sent me, the living God, right? It's this total opposite move, right? Octavian Augustus Caesar is an ordinary mortal like any one of us. He's just a human being, but has this pretense of needing to be received as God, and so tries to make himself look as big a deal as possible, blustering and pontificating about his greatness and having his name plastered and carved over every surface he can find back in the first century. It would be so pathetic, except that he also intimidated and conquered an awful lot of people. On the other hand, the living God doesn't need to dazzle or wow or impress anybody. The living God is interested in connecting with us and chooses to work through ordinary people. So the living God, Jesus says, doesn't require big fanfare or flags flapping in the breeze or trumpets or banners or armies. The living God is willing to work through fishermen and tax collectors, ordinary people, mess-ups, people who sometimes get it right and sometimes get it wrong, sometimes who are bold and brave and sometimes are so fearful they have to be nudged by Jesus to take a step forward. Ordinary people are the means through which God chooses to connect and meet other people, to be present in the world. That's the big deal claim Jesus makes. When God wants to be introduced to the world, God doesn't have to dazzle or put on a spectacle, but God is willing to work through ordinary people, not just like Peter and James and John a long time ago, but through you and me. The same words Jesus spoke to his disciples weren't reserved for just those 12, but for you and me as well. When we are sent out into the world, we are sent as ambassadors. It's the very presence of the living God, who doesn't require that we impress people or put on fake selves so that people think, oh, wow, they're so awesome, they're so great, their lives are all put together, they're great. That must be what God is like. But in all of our ordinariness, in all of our brokenness, in all of our frustrations, in all of our worst moments as well as our best, God chooses to be revealed to the world through our ordinariness rather than needing to dazzle, impress, or pontificate to anybody. I'm reminded of this old insight of Margaret Thatcher, who's the former Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. She said, being powerful is like being an elegant lady. If you have to tell people that you are, you aren't, right? I think Caesar could have learned something like that. If you have to go around telling people how awesome and great and powerful you are, maybe you protest too much. But the real living God doesn't need to do any of that. The real living God doesn't need to dazzle or wow, but chooses to work through you and me so that when people receive us into their lives, they are receiving the presence of Jesus. So that when people receive the presence of Jesus, they are brought face to face with the living God. How about that? Jesus chooses for you to be his presence and his face for people around you. You and I, wherever we go, whatever we say, whatever we do, people will get an impression about who Jesus is and who God is through us. We don't have to impress anybody. We can simply show the same kind of love through ordinary means in our ordinary selves, and that will bring people face to face with the living God. That's what we're going to explore this coming Sunday. We hope you'll join us for that conversation. See you then.